You ever have one of those moments where it feels like your entire life has been leading up to a single afternoon? That was me Friday, 10 p.m., the moment I had been working toward for 6 long, exhausting, soul numbing years of single motherhood, late night budgeting, and holding my breath at the pharmacy counter, hoping Gregory's asthma meds wouldn't wipe out my entire checking account. The promotion to executive assistant wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't going to make us rich, but it would have meant we could finally breathe. I wouldn't have to check my balance before buying groceries. Gregory could maybe join an after school club or get new sneakers. Without me calculating how many overtime hours I'd need, I'd worked at the company for 4 years, administrative role behind the scenes work. No one noticed unless it went wrong. I noticed, I made sure it never went wrong. For 6 months, I'd taken on every special project they threw at me, volunteered for extra hours, stayed late, came in early. I even skipped Gregory's school concert last fall to finish a budget report Andrew needed. I wanted this. So when Andrew finally told me I was a front runner for the promotion, I started crying right there in the break room. I laughed it off like something got in my eye, but the truth, I was proud of myself for the first time in a long time. My interview was set. Friday at 2 p.m. Gregory would be at school, and I'd take a long lunch break, do the interview, then come back to my desk like nothing happened. Like I wasn't clinging to the edge of a life I was desperate to rebuild. But of course, life doesn't care about your plans. Gregory started coughing Wednesday night, not his usual bedtime cough. This one was sharp, almost barking. I knew that sound. I've known that sound since he was 2. That sound meant a flare-up was coming. Thursday morning, he had a low-grade fever, glassy eyes, and that heaviness in his chest that made every breath feel like a battle. I took the day off, got him to the pediatrician. She prescribed steroids and told me he needed full rest for at least 48 hours. No school, no daycare, nothing. That's when I made the call I thought I'd never have to make. I called my mom. Now some people hear mom and picture comfort, safety, warmth. Mine, I picture polite distance, perfect makeup, a sigh that says I'm a burden before she even opens her mouth. But still. I hoped just 2 hours, that's all I needed. I explained the situation, laid out everything, the timing, the opportunity. How I just needed someone to sit with Gregory for 2 hours on Friday. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Oh, honey, this weekend's not good for us. We're going to the Williams anniversary party Saturday, and I need Friday to get my hair done and prepare." You know how these things are? I sat there blinking like maybe I'd misheard her. My son was sick. I was begging not for money, not for a weekend, just 2 hours, and she was talking about her hair. I reminded her this wasn't just any meeting. This was a chance at a better life for her grandson. The one she posts Facebook pictures with every holiday like she's the best grandma in the world. She sighed that familiar, long-suffering sigh. Maybe this is a sign you need to reevaluate your priorities as a mother. I hung up. Because if I didn't, I was going to say something I'd never be able to take back. I spent the next 24 hours calling every number I could think of. Friends, coworkers, Gregory's classmates' parents, even the neighbor downstairs who once babysat for half an hour during a plumbing emergency. No one could help short notice sick kid, no one could. I left a voicemail with HR, hoping, praying they could reschedule the interview. But Friday morning, the response came in Andrew's schedule was packed and the decision had to be made by Tuesday. No exceptions, so I did what moms do. I sat on the couch with my feverish little boy in my lap, cartoons playing in the background, and emailed HR to withdraw from consideration. At 4:00 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "How did the interview go? Did you make it work?" I stared at it like it was in another language. Either she forgot she'd refused to help me, or she expected me to pull off a miracle anyway. I didn't respond. The next day, another text. "We're heading to the Williams party. You and Gregory should come by for dinner tomorrow. I'm making pot roast," like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just dismantled my entire trajectory with one flippant refusal. Sunday morning, I called her, told her we wouldn't be coming for dinner, that I was deeply hurt, that she'd let me down in a way I wouldn't forget. Her answer: "You can't expect me to drop everything every time you have a crisis. I raised you. Now it's your turn to raise your child." And that's when I realized something. I think I'd always known deep down I was on my own, truly, completely, painfully alone. I spent that Sunday evening curled up on the couch, the TV playing some kids' movie. I wasn't really watching while Gregory dozed against my side. His little hand on my arm was the only thing grounding me. I kept replaying my mother's words. "I raised you, now it's your turn." Like parenting was some kind of debt I owed back with interest. Like the love and care she'd given me, if you could even call it that, was a loan I was now failing to repay. Monday morning, I got the email. The promotion went to someone else, someone who made the interview, someone who didn't have to choose between their kid and their future. I cried in my car during lunch. 20 minutes of silent sobbing, trying not to mess up my makeup, then walked back into the office like I hadn't just lost the only real chance I had to move our lives forward, and then, as if the universe hadn't already kicked me hard enough, I got a text from my dad that evening. Your mother said we could use some help this month. Dad's meds went up and property taxes are due. Can you send anything by Friday? I just stared at the message. They knew what had happened. They knew I'd lost the promotion because of them, and they still asked me for money. I didn't reply. I couldn't. The rage and heartbreak were tangled up too tightly. Instead, I tucked Gregory into bed, sat at my tiny kitchen table with a mug of cheap decaf, and stared at my online banking app. Savings, $118.39, credit card maxed rent due in 10 days. And yet somehow I'd become the financial safety net for two fully capable adults who lived in a paid-off home and went on weekend trips to the lake house, the same people who couldn't spare 2 hours when their grandson was sick. It was like I'd been walking through my life with my eyes half closed, accepting scraps, telling myself this was just how family worked, that I owed them. But the scales were starting to fall from my eyes, and what I saw wasn't love, it was entitlement. The next few days were a blur of polite texts from HR, awkward glances from coworkers who knew I'd been passed over, and desperate attempts to keep Gregory's spirits up. He was back at school feeling better, blissfully unaware that our world had tilted. He kept asking when we'd visit Grandma and Grandpa. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain emotional manipulation to a 7-year-old who just wants someone to read him a bedtime story and sneak him gummy bears? Then the text started Wednesday afternoon, a screenshot of a credit card bill for $378.62, no context, just the image. 20 minutes later, we need help with this by Friday or they'll raise the interest rate. I put my phone face down on the counter and stirred the macaroni for Gregory, hands shaking. The absurdity of it all. They acted like I was their financial advisor or their personal ATM. I thought of all the times I'd bailed them out, the urgent car repair that turned out to be a luxury upgrade, the Christmas emergency that somehow didn't stop them from a ski trip in January. Each time I dipped into savings that were already stretched thin, telling myself, this is the last time. But it never was, because they never stopped asking and I never stopped giving. That night I didn't respond. I applied for 3 new jobs instead. Anything, anywhere, something that would pay more, respect, more see me. Thursday came, and with it a voicemail from my dad. Your mother is very upset. We need to talk. This is important. No apology, no concern about what I was going through. Just more demands. By Friday, the calls had turned into guilt-tripping essays, texts filled with phrases like, we sacrificed everything for you. We gave you life, and this is how you repay us. Family helps family. Funny how family only seemed to mean something when they needed something. The tipping point came that weekend. Gregory and I were at the park, finally enjoying some sunshine, when their SUV pulled up. He ran toward them, excited, while I felt my stomach knot. I hadn't prepared for this. My dad hugged Gregory, then came over to me. We just wanted to talk. Sweetheart, I crossed my arms. You drove 25 minutes to corner me at a park, but couldn't drive the same distance to help me when I needed it most. He blinked, surprised, like the hypocrisy hadn't even occurred to him. We talked, or rather, he listed their problems, and I stood my ground for the first time in my life. When I told him they couldn't count on me anymore, I saw it, the flicker of confusion, then panic, because I'd always folded before. Not this time. That night I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, Gregory snoring softly beside me because he'd had a nightmare and crawled into my bed. I thought about everything. And I realized I wasn't just angry, I was done with the guilt, done with the manipulation, done playing the role of the dutiful daughter when no one showed up for me. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the voicemail from my aunt. Maybe it was the GoFundMe link titled Help 2 Seniors Stay in Their Home with a Goal of $155,000. Maybe it was just years of quiet rage that finally had nowhere left to go but out, but something inside me clicked. I spent my entire lunch break that Monday reading article after article titled things like Signs You Were Raised by Emotionally Immature Parents, How to Set Boundaries Without Guilt, You're Not a Bad Daughter for Saying No. It was like reading my own diary written by strangers. Every sentence confirmed something I'd always felt but never had the courage to say out loud. This wasn't normal, this wasn't love, and it wasn't my job to fix it. That evening, while Gregory colored pictures of the solar system at our tiny kitchen table, I turned my phone on silent. No more reading the desperate texts. No more guilt-laced voicemails. No more letting their drama derail my healing. Instead, I updated my resume. I applied for jobs like it was my new religion. I even started drafting a short cover letter that didn't apologize for being a mom. For once, I wasn't begging anyone to understand me. I was offering what I knew I was worth. I was exhausted, but for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. 2 days later, I got a call for an interview. It wasn't a dream job, but it paid more and offered flexible hours. The manager, Douglas, even mentioned remote options for parents when I casually brought up my childcare situation. He didn't flinch, just nodded and said, "We all have lives." It floored me. After the call, I looked over at Gregory and whispered, "We're gonna be okay." Then came another blow, though. By now, it felt more pathetic than painful. My parents tried to get into my apartment building. They showed up while I was at work, claiming they had medication to drop off for Gregory and had forgotten their key. They'd never had a key, I'd never authorized access. But they sat in the lobby for 2 hours, insisting they had a right to see their grandson. When I got the call from the building manager, my heart dropped. Not from fear, just disbelief. They weren't stopping, they were escalating. That night after Gregory went to bed, I drafted the hardest message I'd ever written, a formal, clear, respectful, but firm certified letter to my parents, outlining that any further contact attempts without my consent, especially involving Gregory, would be considered harassment. Legal action would follow if needed. My hands shook the entire time I typed, but when I hit print, something inside me settled. Not peace exactly, but power. A reclamation of everything they'd taken from me over the years. My time, my money, my voice, no more. Gregory noticed the change. He didn't have the words, but he started sleeping better, laughing more, hugging me out of nowhere. He still asked why we didn't visit Grandma and Grandpa, and I tried to explain in the simplest way I could. Sometimes people we love don't treat us very kindly, I said one night sitting beside him as he arranged his planets poster. It's okay to love them, and it's okay to take space from them if they hurt us. He blinked at me. But I still love Grandma. I know, I said, smiling softly. Me too. Love doesn't just disappear, but love doesn't mean we let people hurt us, right? He nodded, then taped Saturn to the wall beside his bed. The morning of my interview with Douglas's company, I packed Gregory's lunch, picked out my favorite only blazer, and dropped him off at school like any other Tuesday. The air felt different, crisp, lighter. At the interview, I told the truth, not the messy, dramatic version, but the real one. I said, I'm a single mom and my schedule sometimes needs flexibility, but I show up, I care deeply, and I'm used to handling pressure. Most people wouldn't survive. Douglas looked at me for a long moment before saying, honestly, that's exactly the kind of person we need. I left the building smiling. Not because I knew I'd get the job, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't ashamed of my life. I was proud of surviving it. That night, my parents showed up at my door again, suitcases in hand, tears in their eyes, saying they had nowhere else to go, and I did something I never thought I could. I said no. I told them I could help them find somewhere else to stay, my aunt's place, a hotel, anywhere but here. But they could not stay in my home. Not after everything. My mom's face twisted. We're your parents. We raised you. I met her eyes and said quietly, and I'm raising Gregory. That comes first now. I closed the door, and for the first time ever, I didn't cry. It's been almost 2 months since I said no at the door, since I turned my parents away and chose myself, chose Gregory. And life hasn't magically turned perfect, but for the first time in years, it feels like mine. The new job came through. Douglas called the following week, and when he said, we'd love to have you, I nearly dropped the phone. The pay was better, the benefits were better, but more than anything, they treated me like I mattered, like I was human. When I explained that I needed flexibility during sick days, with my son, Douglas didn't flinch. He said, of course, that's part of the reason we offer remote options. It felt like being seen, like maybe I hadn't been asking for too much all this time, just asking the wrong people. Gregory and I moved. It wasn't a huge change. We stayed in the same school district, but we found a 2-bedroom apartment for the first time ever. Gregory had his own room. You should have seen his face at IKEA when I told him he could pick out his own bedspread. He went with one that had planets and stars and little rockets. He said, because I'm Jupiter, remember the biggest one. It was the first time I'd felt joy in a purchase instead of guilt. Our refrigerator doesn't sound like it's dying anymore. The water pressure in the shower doesn't drop to a trickle. Mid-rinse. These little things feel like miracles, not because they're fancy, but because they're stable. And me, I started therapy. It was covered under my new insurance, and honestly, I wish I'd done it sooner. My therapist, her name's Lydia, she didn't try to fix me. She didn't question my story or suggest maybe my parents were doing their best. Instead, she helped me see the patterns I'd been raised in, how love in my family always came with conditions, how boundaries were seen as betrayal, how I was trained to feel guilty for saying no, especially if someone cried, and how that training shaped the way I mothered Gregory. We talked about how often I'd tiptoe around his feelings, afraid of upsetting him, how I overcompensated for the absence of his father, how I'd been teaching him, without meaning to, that love meant self-sacrifice. And I made a decision: that cycle ends with me. I started small, saying no when I needed to, not rushing to fix everything for everyone, not explaining myself over and over just to feel allowed to exist. I stopped answering my parents' messages, not to punish them, but because I needed space. Real silent space to heal, to breathe. When they sent group texts to the family or posted vague things on Facebook, I didn't react. My brother Damien and I made a pact we'd check in with each other, but we wouldn't let our parents triangulate us again. He told me once, they want us to feel like bad kids, so we keep trying to prove we're not. I nodded and said, I'm done proving. Gregory still asks about them sometimes. He'll see an old photo or smell my mom's perfume on a passing stranger and go quiet for a moment, and I always answer him with kindness, even if my heart aches. They're still your grandparents, I tell him. We're just taking a little space right now. He doesn't fully understand, but that's okay. He doesn't need to. What he needs is consistency, safety, me showing up, and I do every single day. Last week, we had a movie night in our new place blanket, fort, popcorn, hot cocoa, and mismatched mugs. At one point, Gregory leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered, I like it here better, it's cozy. And I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. Not because everything was solved, but because I wasn't waiting for anyone else to save me anymore. That same night, I got a text from my dad. Just one line, can we talk? Your mother is in therapy now. And for the first time ever, I didn't panic. I didn't feel pulled back in. I felt curious. I haven't responded yet. I'm giving it time. Because healing doesn't mean I have to reopen old wounds. It means I get to choose when and how I engage, and I'm finally choosing with intention, not obligation. It's been 6 months since my parents showed up at my door with suitcases and threats. 6 months since I stood my ground and said no, and everything's different now. Not perfect, not easy, but real. I've been at the new job 5 months, and true to their word, when Gregory had another asthma flare-up last month, Douglas didn't even blink. I worked from home for 3 days, guilt-free. That kind of flexibility, it's priceless, it's sanity, it's motherhood without constant sacrifice. Our new place isn't fancy, but it's ours. Gregory has his own room, and last weekend he gave me a tour of his solar system posters, explaining each planet like a tiny professor. I stood there in the doorway, watching his little hands point at Jupiter and thought, we did it. We got out. I still get messages sometimes. Some are from relatives who don't understand, who've only heard their version. The dramatic half-true saga about the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her elderly parents. Some are passive-aggressive posts on Facebook, cryptic lines about disrespectful children and family that turns away. But I don't respond because I don't owe anyone the story of my survival, and I don't need to be understood to know I did the right thing. A few weeks ago, something happened that would have broken me before Gregory's school called. Someone my parents had tried to pick him up, claiming it was a doctor's appointment. The office paused and called me to verify. I got there just in time to see them waiting in the parking lot. My mom waved. My dad looked sheepish, and I walked straight past them into the school and made sure they were removed from all pickup authorizations. I submitted documents, showed them texts, asked them to flag any unexpected attempts. That was the moment I stopped hoping they'd change and started acting like they wouldn't. I sent a final certified letter, stating clearly, no more unsupervised contact, no showing up unannounced, no emotional blackmail. Any violation would mean legal action. It hurt to write, but it felt like drawing a line in the sand for the last time. Not out of anger, out of love for my son, for myself, for the life we're finally allowed to live. Gregory still asks sometimes. On his 8th birthday, he asked if Grandma and Grandpa would be coming. When I said no, I braced myself, but he just blinked and said, okay, can I still have that chocolate volcano cake? I sent photos to my aunt to pass along. I'm not cruel, I'm just careful, and that care, that boundary, it's how I love now, not with blind loyalty, but with intention, with protection. Because love without safety isn't love, it's obligation. Then last week, something unexpected happened. A call from my dad. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. His voice was different, softer, slower, he said. Your mom's been in therapy, apparently after months of resistance and one minor health scare. Her doctor had suggested stress counseling. She's been seeing a therapist for 6 weeks, and according to him, she's starting to see things differently. There was no big apology, no begging, just an offer to rebuild something, slowly on my terms. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't immediately shut down. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I told him, start with updates, emails, photos of Gregory, no in-person visits, no pressure. He agreed. My therapist says real change takes time, not words, not tears, actions, consistency. So I'm watching, waiting, and not holding my breath. I still have bad days. Nights where I wonder if I've been too harsh or not harsh enough. Moments where I see something Gregory does and think, she would have loved this, then I remember. She didn't show up when he needed her most, and that's the memory I return to when I doubt myself. But in between those moments, there's joy. There's quiet mornings with pancakes and cartoons. There's Gregory running into my arms at pickup, telling me he got to be Star Student of the Week. There's me brushing my teeth in the mirror and not flinching when I look at my own reflection, because I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living. And maybe the biggest shift of all, I've stopped needing a perfect ending. I don't need my mom to become someone new overnight. I don't need my dad to undo decades of silence. What I need is what I've already built, a home where love means presence, not payment, a relationship with my son where no one uses guilt as a leash, a future that belongs to us. If you were me, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven? Would you let them back in after everything? Or would you like me learn to love them? From a distance, I'd really love to know, because I'm still learning too.